We're recording now.
Good.
Are you ready?
No.
The good news is you just scheduled a haircut.
Oh, jeez.
Hey, you didn't say anything about my new backdrop. You didn't notice, did you?
No. What is it? Are we recording?
We are.
Okay.
I got a real headboard on my bed.
No, I didn't. No, yeah. No, I didn't notice. I just looked at the hats.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 27. We are doing the Beatitudes still. So, you're trying not to have a weird reaction to my intro, aren't you?
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us. We are back, and we're continuing our look at the Beatitudes, this iconic sermon series that Dave did in the 90s. While
80s.
he was it really you're right, it was the late 80s.
No, 86.
Yep. In the late 80s. And we're revisiting them because it helps speak to The Way of the Rabbi, which is a series that we were working through before. And how do we follow Christ? How do we live our lives in a way that mimics what he did? So, Dave, we're going to be working through the third Beatitude. Is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
It's one that you're really excited about, isn't it?
Well, what I would say is that, the way we introduced the attitudes in the beginning was that, it's some people call not just the Beatitudes, but the Sermon on the Mount, which starts with the Beatitudes, as the greatest sermon ever preached. And I think it's the strangest sermon, at least with the Beatitudes. And because it says strange things, so we kind of waded into the whole topic by, when he says poor in spirit, who wants to be that?
Right.
And so it takes some explaining. And the same thing with mourning. It sounds like blessed are the bummed and happy are the sad, which makes no sense at all. And so kind of the whole way I approached the Beatitudes to begin with was dealing with my aversion. Honestly, the aversion, I don't, I could get the answer right in Sunday school. Who inherits the earth? Oh, the meek. But I don't want to be meek. And that's today. And of all the Beatitudes that I have felt, and I think people, I don't know everybody, but there's this around meekness, because meek just sounds weak. If I have, this is actually a good lesson to bring or teaching to bring when you can interact with people, because it's fun to hear people's kind of, if someone said, if you heard that the word about you was, she's really meek, would you feel complimented?
No.
Okay. Would you hire someone who was meek? Depends what the job is, right? Would you hire someone who's meek? Who would you go into battle with someone who was meek?
Heck no.
No, because and then it tells you what you think of meek. I would maybe go on a nature hike with someone who was meek, silent retreat with someone who was meek, because they won't bother me, but I don't even want to watch a football game with meek, because meek it's just wimpy.
And boring. We talked about that. It's just boring.
Mm-hmm. Really?
I don't want to do boring.
No. Anyway, but the whole point of meek was, not only do I not want to be meek, I don't even want to hang around with meek. So it's got a bad rap. Okay. Mm-hmm. And even the dictionary, I remember when I was studying, it says meekness is deficient in courage. That's so blessed are the deficient in courage. That I don't think that's what it means. Once again, this is one of those places where getting into the Greek, like that Greek word for mourning, there were 6 Greek words for that concept, and that's what kind of it has a nuance to it that isn't apparent on the surface. And meekness is kind of that way. Praos is the Greek word. The root of the word translated from the Greek isn't very helpful, because it means gentle, mild, tender, which is kind of what I think of with meek. One thing that's helpful is that it sometimes speaks to, praos is used to describe a soothing medicine or a gentle breeze. And I would like to be. We would like to be that for people who are broken and mourning, and then they run into someone who's a soothing medicine and a gentle breeze. Blessed are those people. I can warm up to that a little bit.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound wimpy. That sounds good. That sounds like Jesus and somebody I would like to be like. But the usage of the word, sometimes it's just the definition, but what opened it up this time is how that Greek word was used in culture. And one of the ways that word was often used was in connection to the taming of a wild animal. And so when the animal was tame, it was called praos. It was meek. My favorite thing is the analogy is that of a wild horse. If you had a wild horse in a pen or a corral, what are they called? A corral?
Yeah.
It'd be running all over the place. It's unrideable. And it's weird because even the word we use we break a horse until it's broken. Blessed are the broken. There are connections to this. Until it becomes praos, it's out of control. It can't be ridden. But the word praos, relative to the taming of a wild animal, let's kind of use the analogy of a horse, is that now when it's praos, when it's been broken, it still has all its power, but the power is now under control. So you picture a horse if it's broken and it's praos, all of the power is there. It's not a spineless pile of mush. It didn't turn into a puddle. It's not a doormat for the world. All of the power is there. All of the strength is there. But now this horse moves to the prompting of the rider. And the analogy there would be, as a human being under the influence of the Spirit, when I'm broken, if you will, and come up praos, meaning I'm not a spineless pile of mush, but now the power is under the control of the Spirit. Go back to the horse. Now when it's under the control of the rider, that horse goes right when the rider says we go right, and the rider says left, we go left. And I mean, it's weird because sometimes in the life of Jesus, we'll get to this, the rider would say charge, and would that still be meek? In Matthew 11, Jesus actually describes himself as being meek. I am meek and lowly of heart. Stop right there. Well, see, that verse confirms all of that. I mean, what the image that comes into my mind there is soft and weak and not power under control, even power under control. I am meek and lowly of heart. I think of a way in the manger. The cattle are lowing, the poor baby wakes, but little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. Why? Because he's meek. I don't want to bother anybody. So, because I'm meek and lowly of heart, and like I just want to disappear. But that's not the whole picture. That's just not the whole picture, because at some point you have to keep thinking. And okay, if you want to stop there, you've defined meekness, lowly of heart, blah blah blah. But you have to reconcile that with the same Jesus who is the embodiment of meek, power under control. Who in Matthew 3 verse 5 it says his anger burned at the Pharisees when they were arguing about the Sabbath. And they came to Jesus because why do your disciples not observe the Sabbath the way we observe the Sabbath? And they had this big argument. And Jesus looked at them, and his anger burned toward them because of their hardness of heart. So, question: okay, did he quit being meek? Is he no longer meek? Is there something that would have room under the definition of meek that would still get angry at certain things? It's kind of a weird thought, I think. In Matthew 23, all the woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. He calls them a brood of vipers. How shall you escape the sentence of hell? So he took off his meekness, and that wasn't there anymore. So how do we reconcile the power under control? So is there some way that sometimes under the control of the Spirit, there would be certain things that would make you angry, and that's an interesting. We'll get back to that because that is an interesting thing relative to the things that made Jesus angry. Because spoiler alert: the things that made him angry weren't when people came at him. When people were shut out from the kingdom, when people were marginalized. The man with the withered hand, that's Mark chapter 3 again. And people were more upset that they broke a rule. Like you can't heal someone on the Sabbath because it's the Sabbath. And it made them angry that they cared more about the rule than they cared about the guy with the withered hand. And that, I think that's power under control. A good balanced text is First Peter 2. I think we're aware of this one. This is Peter is describing Jesus at his trial, or that, around the whole time of his crucifixion. But it says that when he was reviled, he reviled not again. When he was slandered, he uttered no threats. So in some sense, when it was coming just at him, like if you offend me, that wasn't what got him to react. He was power under control. But even there, First Peter 1, when it says being reviled, he reviled not again, it's not a passive kind of, I'm just a doormat. Because it says in verse 23, when reviled, he reviled not again. But he kept entrusting himself to the one who judges rightly the living and the dead. So the tough-minded faith was, no, I'm not hitting back. I'm not going to defend myself. I'm not going to start uttering threats because they're coming after me. I'm going to, tough-minded faith, keep entrusting myself to the one who judges, to the one who can sort this whole thing out. And that's what meekness looks like sometimes, under the control of the Spirit. But sometimes, now I'm going to get back to the other stuff. Just kind of work with me. It'd be good to have interaction from people right now. Right. Under the prompting of the writer, the writer says, pounce. It's time to pounce. It's time to stop this. Back to Mark 3, verse 5. He looked at anger at the Pharisees because of their hardness of the heart, because they didn't care about the withered hand. I've already said all this. And they didn't actually, the Pharisees also didn't care actually about the Sabbath. They cared about the rule being broken. And so Jesus said to the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath, knowing it was going to make the Pharisees really mad, and it did, he said, stretch forth your hand. And his hand was restored. And immediately the Pharisees began to plot his death. But all of this comes in the context. The first verse was that Jesus looked on them and had anger toward them because of the hardness of their heart. It's just a fascinating picture on a number of levels. One is this. And I think every place I've looked, this is what happens. Every time in the scriptures where you see Jesus angry, when Jesus got angry, at least in this one, people got restored. Like Jesus' anger resulted in somebody being healed. We'll talk about that in the cleansing of the temple too. He got angry there, and all of a sudden marginalized people because of his anger became the focus of attention. So what kind of anger is that? When Jesus got angry, a withered hand got restored. Is it different than mine? Right? Like when I get angry, do people get restored? Or do they get blown up? When I get angry, who am I protecting? Am I protecting the man with the withered hand? Is that what I'm really all about? I'm all about marginalized. And if you don't care about them, and you just and you even do things to keep the marginalized, the people who are withered from getting the help from God or whatever that they need, or is it that what I really love is me? And when my temple and being reviled, we revile again, and being slandered, we will utter threats. The sorting out of all those. So I remember when I did a series on love, and you can just kind of almost, okay, just go love, but love is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Neither is anger. It's because why are you angry? What is underneath all of that? And I'm thinking meekness has a few little shades that we didn't know about as well. For instance, if I have anger, let's say I'm just angry right now, does that automatically mean there is no love? Or you can't be angry and meek at the same time. If I'm meek, or if I have all sorts of love, could I ever be angry? because as soon as you get angry, well, you must not have any love. Or as soon as you get angry, well, you mustn't have any meekness. A little more shaded than that. Okay, try this one on. I'm going in different directions. I think sometimes our anger, well, I think maybe always, our anger, what we get angry at reveals what we're committed to.
Yeah.
So if I'm committed to me, which we kind of are, then I'm going to get angry when I don't get my way. It's real simple. And if I'm full of anger and, I can even act like I really care about that cause, but really, I just love it that I get to vent on something that maybe looks noble, and you're full of baloney. You're not what you're opposing or standing against is not necessarily because you care so much about that. You'd have to keep going back to this power under control is the thing I'm moving against, even maybe with some anger, being prompted by the Spirit. Is the Spirit is the rider in me, if you will, is moving toward the battle, because this violates everything that God cares about. I don't know how noble it was, but I remember early in the ministry, there was this, the Beatitudes informed it, blessed are those who get out here, what's going on in here. And the energy around that was, blessed are those who quit pretending and looking good. And I remember feeling a kind of anger. It's a bit strong. I felt passion. Maybe it was there. Maybe there's a fine line there. Incredible passion and kind of an anger for people who in the name of religion would keep this pretense happy face. And it would keep people, it would create this environment where how things look is what matters. And so then how things are will never get dealt with. And I remember feeling, we got to blow that up. We got to blow that up. You don't have to kill anybody, but there was some prompting, I think, to move toward that and go, we need to pounce on some of that stuff. I don't know if that's a good example or not. But his anger revealed what he loved, and he loved people with withered hands. And he loved the marginalized. And even if it got him in trouble, like it did when he healed the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath, which meant he broke a rule. Again, it really shows this inequity of what you care about. The Pharisees cared about the rule, religion. They didn't care about the withered hand guy at all. And that ought to make you mad. Kind of, anyway. Yeah. Okay, another example is, and this is my favorite, but it's in Matthew 21 where he cleanses the temple. Generally, anytime anybody tries to deal with the anger of Jesus and try to reconcile that in their head, they go, well, yeah, but what about Matthew 21? If he's meek and lowly of heart, what about Matthew 21? And it's where he cleanses the temple. In verse 1, it says he drove them out. And it was, I don't know how violent it was, but it's pretty forceful, let's just say. I should say that. And what was interesting about that, though, is that what was making him angry? What was making him angry there? What was the deal? Here's the deal. The primary mission of Jesus was to provide access to the Father. I mean, in one way, you could argue that. Like, the reason he died on the cross to forgive us of our sins was so that we would have access to the Father. So he's got this big passion about providing access to God the Father. And he runs into this temple, this religious system. It was a corrupt system that instead of providing access to people to make it easy to get to God, that's, by the way, why the grace message was so, I thought, central to the early days of Open Door, because that message of grace gave people access to God. It's like, oh, I can come like this. I can come a mess. Yeah, you need to clean up the mess, but you don't have to clean it up first. It gave access to God. And in this temple system, there were a variety of ways that access was cut off. In fact, even the structure of the temple itself communicated, you can't get to God.
Yeah.
On the outside of the temple, if you pictured this circular thing, I don't think it was circular, but they had what they would call the courtyard of the Gentiles, and it was called that because the Gentiles were there, which meant everybody was there. Horses, dogs, pigs. The money changers were there. That's where the market kind of place. It was a mess. It was just like chaotic. Everything was there. Now it's going to be interesting. I'm getting to the end of the story because that's where Jesus was. So where is God in the story? He's in the outer. He's where the mess is. That's where he is. But their belief in the temple was in the courtyard of the Gentiles. That was the outside where everybody could be. Inside of that, only Jews. Okay. Inside of that, only men. Okay, few less. Inside of that, only priests. Inside of that, at the very core, was the Holy of Holies. That's where God is. Guess where God is, really, in the story? He's in the courtyard of the Gentiles. That's where Jesus is. I love that.
Yeah, that'll preach.
Thing. Yeah, but the point is, right, even the structure said you can't, you can't, you don't have access to God, the Father. And Jesus says, this is all about providing access. And so something's rising in him. There was a tax, the temple system was corrupt. In addition to the Roman tax, there was a temple tax. And so people were incredibly poor and being taxed by Rome and also by the temple. And so people would come to the temple and they would have to pay a temple tax. But the other thing was that part of the function of the temple was to help people kind of experience God, but also kind of be absolved of their sins some way. And there were all sorts of ceremonial washings. I don't know, we've talked about that before. I don't have time to go deeply into it, but in that Jewish religion culture, there were all sorts of ceremonial washings, but you would have to have implements to do this particular ceremony or that particular ceremony. And the other thing was there were so many ways to be unclean. Mm-hmm. So there's all these ceremonial washings that you have to do to be acceptable to God, to even get into the temple. But there's all sorts of ways to be unclean. So you come to the temple, and let's say I want to participate in this thing that helps me become cleansed in some way. And I come to the temple, and there's the money changers. So there's this racket. And if you're unclean in this way, or you want to be washed that way, you have to pay. And you have to pay a lot. And so there was this system where people would come, want to participate in the thing that would make them ceremonially clean, which would mean they could get in. Now they have access if you pay a lot. I remember the story I kind of made up in my head. It's not like I know this happened, but I featured in my mind a family, just sweet little family trying to teach their kids about God. And they raise this little lamb, and they're going to bring the lamb, they raise it, and they're going to go to Passover and bring it to the temple. And out of a heart of just wanting to be devoted to God and absolved of our sins or forgiven of our sins, we bring this little lamb, and you can just see the sincerity of a little kid doing something like that. But that little kid or family or whoever they are, going to the temple, which symbolically says that's where you're going to meet God, because that's the symbol. Like you go to church, you kind of think you're going to meet God. Problem is, in the system, the last place you're probably going to meet God is at the temple, because what this little family would run into with the lamb they raised would be it would need to be a temple approved lamb, so that he would bring the lamb and go, there's a lamb I want to sacrifice. He goes, there's a blemish, can't use this lamb. Put it in the back, but this one you can use, you didn't have to buy it. That was the kind of system. And so the point is, no access. You can't get in. And if you do, you're going to have to pay. And quite frankly, in very literal ways, guess who was excluded more than anyone else? Poor people. Can't afford it. I can't afford the temple tax. I can't afford to do the ceremonial cleansing that gives me access. So the message to not just Gentiles, but to poor people, Jews who wanted to be reconciled to God, the message was, nope, you're out. In fact, in Matthew 23, Jesus says, you keep shutting the kingdom off from people who are actually wanting to enter. And you keep saying, no. That's what religion systems do. You keep piling heavy loads on people that none of them are able to bear, instead of lifting the load. And guess what? It made Jesus angry. Because we got to have provide access to God. So out of that, so is he no longer meek? Or is this power under control? When it's like even he pounces at the right thing. The thing that's in the way of people getting to God is what he goes after, and he drives that stuff out, and it revealed, among other things, his commitment to access to the Father. Is that still under the umbrella of meek? Is this power under control, under the control of the Spirit, saying, you need to pounce on this one? But the final, the one that seals the deal for me anyway, in that story of Jesus cleansing the temple picture, however he did it, I think the text even indicates the money changers were running, and I see, the birds flapping and their feathers everywhere, the coins are rolling, all sorts of noise and chaos. And so they're all running away, because that's what you do when somebody gets upset, they run away. And in the middle of all that chaos, it says in verse 14, it says, the blind and the lame came to him and he healed them all. Stop right there. Holy cow. First, in the temple business, picture the courtyard of the Gentiles, the buying and the selling and the people coming with their lamb and being told you don't have enough money, big scam. Where were the blind and the lame? I promise you where they were. They were in the shadows. They weren't being cared for. They weren't the focus of ministry. They were in the way of ministry, which that says some stuff about where we focus even as a church. That was a big message in the early days of Open Door, because until the poor, the blind, the lame, the marginalized are the focus of ministry, maybe we don't have a ministry. But it's actually, the other thing that's fascinating about the blind and the lame is that they went to him and everybody else is running from him. It's weird because his anger looked safe to them, which is bizarre. No, it's not, because someone's fighting for them. Someone's fighting for them. And so now, instead of being in the way of ministry, they were the ministry. There's a huge thing in that. And so power under control, blessed, we went to some pretty bizarre places there. But anyway,
I'm really.
Can I give an invitation now and just wrap it up with? I really love the symbolism. I remember preaching this a lot in the early days. But when you picture a temple or a church, it's the same thing. There's kind of an underneath it. There's this promise: you can meet God here.
Yeah.
And God will be here. Easy access to God here. But the experience that people have often is, even in some churches, it's the last place you're going to meet God. That breaks the heart of God. Mine too. And some tables need to be turned over. But I'd have to hang on meek. I mean, this has got to be not my agenda.
Yeah.
Meek, blessed are those, the meek, power under control. True meekness would be demonstrating an awful lot of discernment and wisdom, and then a willingness to die for what you're. I mean, honestly, if you look at the text, Matthew 21, when he cleansed the temple, I think the next week he was dead. I mean, it was like that was the last straw for the powers. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
And I talked about this a little bit before, what I'm so aware of when you talk about meekness and talk about this power under control is my desire, number one, not necessarily to be meek, but my thought immediately goes to, if I'll just put a lid on my anger, then I'll, number one, display meekness, which will look like Christ-likeness, which is what my goal is, right?
Right.
And really, that's all just backwards.
Yeah.
That's a backwards way of viewing the goal.
Yep.
Right?
Well, even not only the goal, but like if I put a lid on my anger, I think that'd be the worst thing to do.
Right.
But the gift of my anger and acknowledging my anger would not be to put a lid on it, but it would be to wonder, where is that coming from?
Right.
Not that I'm angry or not. Like, angry always is bad. No, it's not. So, but what is that? And like I said earlier, I think, what am I committed to? Me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the work is. It isn't even, don't be angry. It's like, wait, what? Overwhelming me. I don't care about people with withered hands unless it makes me look good, that I do. On,
Yeah.
stuff like that. That's where the work of transformation is. And I love that, because I think that's why it's kind of hard to even unpack all this.
Yeah.
Because it isn't, you can't be meek by trying to act meek. Like, they say, hello, how are you? I don't think it ever looks like that. Power and control. What would that look like? And anyway.
So God, do your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't even want to say that, because it's looks like a big surrender. I mean, I scolded a 6-year-old for something really stupid right before we recorded.
One of your 6-year-olds?
Yeah.
How many do you have?
Depends on the day.
I know. Well, another thing I think there is a flow to the Beatitudes. Blessed are the broken, and out of that, I can't save myself, fix myself, control myself. There comes this praos, weakness, and all of a sudden, all this power. You're not a spineless pile of mush. This is not a spineless pile of mush, under the authority now, under the control, because of brokenness and mourning. Quit pretending that I'm not angry when I am. You just get so real that out of that comes a horse that someone can ride.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the Spirit would be the one who needs to be the rider.
Yep.
Anyway.
Thank you, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks everyone for listening, and send us your stories. I got a couple emails this week. It's good to hear from you and wonder with you about how these Beatitudes, these teachings, these iconic places, even this iconic message in the timeline of Jesus and what he said to us, what does this mean for us right now? What does this mean for the rider, to allow the rider to inform our lives, inform our actions? And that sometimes looks like a lot of surrender. It ain't pretty.
Exactly. No, exactly. I was going to say, it's not even just, it's submitting to the writer.
Mm-hmm.
That's surrender. Yeah. I don't want to do that.
No.
I know. That's where the kingdom is.
Right. All right. Yeah. Next time. See you later.
Bye.